The National Desk, America's News, now.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Gatton. Thanks so much for being with us. On this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and a look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following all week. Speakership showdown, GOP House lawmakers struggling to come together, the impact the days-long stalemate has on the party's future, and the suspect accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in November appeared in court for the first time. The chilling details we're learning about how police tracked him down. Then Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin making a remarkable recovery after collapsing mid-game from cardiac arrest. Plus, Border Patrol agents overwhelmed by migrants attempting to enter the U.S. illegally. The unprecedented measures the agency is taking to stop the surge. But first, it's been 100 years since the Speaker of the House wasn't elected in a single round of voting. The National Desk chief political correspondent Scott Thuman shows us, regardless of how the votes eventually pan out, party insiders fear we're getting a preview of what's to come for Republicans.
The message in Kentucky Wednesday about building bridges, literally and figuratively, as President Biden appeared with several current and former Republican senators promoting infrastructure improvements.
We can work together. We can get things done. We can move the nation forward.
A stark contrast to the intra-party battle back in Washington between House Republicans, mired in a public spat over who will be Speaker and stymieing Kevin McCarthy.
Sir, you do not have the votes, and it's time to withdraw.
It looks messy, but democracy is messy. Democracy is messy by design.
Even a call for unity from often divisive Donald Trump, imploring do not turn a great triumph into a giant and embarrassing defeat. It's time to celebrate. You deserve it. Unfortunately for the GOP, it could be a glimpse into the future, warns former Speaker Newt Gingrich.
These 20 people are making the Republicans look like idiots. I don't know what their end game is. I don't know why they think that 20 people can dictate to 202. It's a real problem.
Which could also damage their abilities to pass budgets, immigration laws, or support the U.S. military. While Democrats have had similar factions to negotiate with over the years, like the so-called squad in the House or swing vote Joe Manchin in the Senate, it never quite put them in a lurch like this one.
There's always going to be a faction that's dissatisfied. I mean, it's a people's house, you know, it's tumultuous, but again, in a narrow majority, you have to move the ball as fast and as far as you can, but nobody's going to be able to score a touchdown on every play.
But for now, House Republicans unable to even start the game. In Washington, Scott Thuman for the National Desk.
Scott, thank you. Developing now, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in November back in the state to face criminal proceedings. An affidavit reveals investigators got a DNA profile from trash at Brian Kohberger's family Pennsylvania home. Police used it to match DNA on a knife sheath found at the scene of the killings in Moscow, Idaho, and to focus on Kohberger as the suspect. Also, phone records put Kohberger's phone near the victim's residence at least a dozen times between June and November. Kohberger was arrested across the country in Pennsylvania, nearly 7 weeks after Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were found stabbed to death in their off-campus home. Doctors at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center say Damar Hamlin is showing signs of improvement. That includes brain function, vital signs, and organ recovery. The Buffalo Bills safety has been in the hospital since going into cardiac arrest during Monday's game against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bills saying Friday morning the 24-year-old's breathing tube was removed overnight, and he's spoken to his team via FaceTime saying, "Love you, boys." Doctors said it's fair to say if CPR or defibrillation on the field would have been delayed, there could be a very different outcome. A new Gallup poll suggests Americans are not optimistic about the economy improving this year after facing high prices and other economic woes in 2022. Now, according to the poll, about 8 in 10 U.S. adults see more struggles on the horizon, like higher taxes and budget deficits. The National Desk Atra El-Nishar explains what could be in store for the U.S. economy in the months ahead.
Opening bell bringing hope 2023 will be better than 2022, the worst year for the stock market since 2008. There are more headwinds than tailwinds at this point, and not just for the United States.
For most of the world economy, this is going to be a tough year.
Managing director for the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, says it's because the three biggest economies, the U.S., EU, and China, are all slowing down at the same time.
The U.S. is most resilient. The U.S. may avoid a recession. We see the labor market remaining quite strong.
With unemployment in the U.S. at just 3.7%, she says that could be a lifeline for the world if it stays low. But that may not happen if inflation stays high and the Federal Reserve has to remain aggressive with high interest rates. More than 2/3 of economists at big banks that do business directly with the Federal Reserve predict a recession this year, according to a new Wall Street Journal survey. They cite red flags like a declining housing market and Americans spending down their savings. Bankrate chief financial analyst Greg McBride says that's skewed toward higher income households.
A lot of middle class and lower income households, they've already burned through it. We've seen savings coming down. We've seen credit card balances going up. And when inflation's been running north of 7%, as it has been, that really stretches household budgets.
And Americans have negative predictions for the new year. According to a new Gallup poll, a majority expects 2023 to be a year of economic difficulty and prices rising at a high rate. The Eurasia Group sees it too throughout the world. Inflation shockwaves, the group lists as fourth on its top risks 2023 report. Writing inflation will linger because of supply chain constraints, lingering pandemic-era savings, and high energy prices caused by Russia's war in Ukraine, which the group notes cannot be solved with monetary policy. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nishar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Atra, thank you. Now to that travel mess. A passenger is suing Southwest Airlines after tens of thousands of flights are canceled over the holiday week. The suit filed in New Orleans accusing the airline of violating federal law. The passenger says after his flights were canceled last month, the airline offered him credit towards a future flight instead of a refund. No comment yet from Southwest. The suit seeking class action status to give other passengers a chance to get those reimbursements. Speaking of passengers, Southwest working with FedEx and other airlines to get your bags returned, also offering 25,000 frequent flyer bonus miles to passengers impacted. The Fact Check team picking up our coverage of the Southwest operational meltdown, digging into the warnings we're told the Biden administration received ahead of the cancellation chaos that happened during the Christmas travel surge.
Ahead of the holidays, members of the Democratic Party warned Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg of a looming airline crisis. I'm back with Connor McIntyre from the Fact Check team. Connor, the secretary received this letter from Democrat senators in November. What did it say?
It was 3 Democrat senators, Maria Cantwell, Ed Markey, and Richard Blumenthal, and they warned that the department needed to quickly strengthen and approve a proposed rule on airline ticket refunds and consumer protections before holiday travel.
Yeah, but that wouldn't really have made a difference in the recent Southwest Airlines cancellations, for example.
Right, not so much with the cancellations, but it would have clarified what passengers are owed. And I pulled up some ways the rule would have done that. One is it would further enforce another federal rule that states it's an unfair business practice for airlines to refuse to provide refunds for canceled or significantly changed flights. And it would also, for the first time, define the term significant change. So those refunds wouldn't be issued on an unclear case-by-case basis anymore. The senators also asked for the department to bolster the rule by requiring airlines to cover other associated costs with flight cancellations, including service fees, hotels, and food.
Yeah, and to be clear, these are proposed rules. They have not been approved, right?
Right, not yet. The period for notice and comment just closed on it last month, but the secretary has been vocal about the issue. He wrote a letter to Southwest CEO Robert Jordan and listed he had 4 priorities for the airline to address, and I have those pulled up for you right there. It includes the things we've been hearing about, like providing meals and ground transportation.
How meaningful are the demands in in that letter? What if Southwest just doesn't do some or any of that stuff?
Well, airlines are largely deregulated, so there's not a lot the department can do to enforce this. However, the department does have authority to hand out fines, and we saw them do this in November when it fined 6 airlines $7.25 million. It issued more than $600 million in refunds to passengers.
Yeah, now we can only hope that they'll do what's being asked just to make things right for all those passengers that were affected, so we'll see what happens there. Connor, thanks. And you can do your own research on this. Connor's listed all of her sources that she looked into online. You can scan the QR code right there on your screen or visit us at thenationaldesk.com to find it there.
Meta has been fined more than $410 million for violating European privacy laws. The Irish Data Protection Commission looked into the parent company of Facebook and Instagram after questions over data processing operations at Meta Ireland. The commission concluded the company illegally forces users to accept targeted advertisements. Regulators saying Meta now has 3 months to bring their data processing operations into compliance. Meta said it is disappointed and intends to appeal. Coming up here on the National Desk, adding up how a series of storms is impacting California's drought. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, starting in Ohio, where by coincidence or fate, a store owner acted just in time, installing security cameras just hours before thousands of dollars worth of merchandise was stolen.
Surveillance video captures a thief smash through the shop's glass door Thursday night, taking 4 mandolins worth thousands. The shop is owned by a local family who recently relocated their business from Nashville to downtown Lebanon. In their 17 years operating across the country, this was a first. Owner Zach Vance isn't so sure the thief knew exactly what he was taking, but Vance believes he will try to resell the rare instruments.
Now the question is if he still has them or not. But they will be hard to unload, as you know, I called every single pawn shop, cash place within like 30 minutes of here, and I called all the other music stores to let them know, like, hey, if somebody walks in with a couple left-handed instruments, you know, that should raise a red flag.
Now over to Texas, where 2 men are facing charges for a street racing crash that injured a San Antonio mother and her young daughter. They were just 10 minutes from home when police say one of the suspects lost control of his car, smashing into theirs. The mother and child have had multiple surgeries, and they're said to face a long road to recovery. A friend of the family had this message for the suspects.
You guys need to think what you've done. We have 2 people who are hurt, and we don't even know the outcome in the future. My family doesn't hate you. They want justice, and basically that's it.
She also said there's a need for stronger laws regarding street racing. In California, officials say above average rainfall has had a positive impact, but it's not enough to turn around the ongoing drought. The extra rainfall has helped raise water levels at some of California's diminishing lakes. Lake Shasta, for example, has risen to 12 feet in just the last year, but meteorologists say there's still a long road ahead to put an end to the drought.
We're gonna need a few years of above normal to really get us out of a significant drought. We didn't get here in 1 year, and we're probably not gonna get out of this in 1 year.
According to the U.S. Drought Monitor, 5 California counties currently fall into the exceptional drought category. Key clues, what investigators are revealing about the crime scene where 4 college students were murdered. Criminal defense attorney Mark O'Mara is here to discuss what could be Brian Kohberger's next move in the case. The suspect in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students has been extradited from Pennsylvania. Criminal defense attorney Mark O'Mara talked with our Eugene Ramirez about how the case could unfold.
I want to start, Mark, with this waiving extradition. Why would a defendant do something like that?
Well, because most states have extradition sort of treaties or agreements. So if you wanted to deny and not waive, you can delay things a week or two, but it's going to happen. So the idea of just getting it going is normally what I would suggest, and I think what he decided to do.
Yeah, some saying that they want to get their hands on that probable cause affidavit, and that won't happen until he gets to Idaho. So once they do get that, what's the next move for the defense?
So, you look at it, see what's going on. That's the first 2 or 3 pages of what's going to be massive amount of information, literally reams and reams of it or terabytes of it. And you want to get that started so you know how strong the state's case is and how you're going to fit in any potential defense.
Now, like many cases that you've worked on, this one's gotten lots of public attention, lots of interest in this. The judge issuing a gag order, I believe that was yesterday. Why does the judge do something like that? And do you agree with that move?
I don't agree with it because I think the public has a right to know. However, as a defense attorney and as a former prosecutor, it seems like they both agreed to the gag order. And it does maintain a certain level of sanctity because, unfortunately, jury pools, the people who may try this case in a year or two, read and listen to everything, and they're going to get infected with at least impartial, incomplete information and maybe just downright wrong information. So the idea of stopping that flow of bad information sometimes makes sense.
One person we may never hear from in this case is Kohberger himself. We're hearing from one of his attorneys that he's invoking his right to remain silent. Is that the right move for someone who's reportedly eager to be exonerated?
Right now, it is the absolute best advice he could ever be given. He cannot say one word that might be contradicted by forensic evidence. And the other part of this is because this, according to how strong the forensic evidence is, this may become a situation where you want to minimize your damage. And that means maybe some mental health mitigation, maybe some anything other than a trial on the merits. And anything you can say now could destroy a potential mitigation, as we call it, mitigation defense coming up in the future.
Sure. Now, one of the few details that we've heard from police is that they've revealed now an alleged suspect DNA match at that crime scene. How does the defense approach what some might call indisputable evidence?
It is getting more and more indisputable, and he'll have to either explain away how else his DNA got there, other than because he was committing a crime, or just acknowledge he was there. And then again, part of it is if you can't deny the forensics, if it's such a strong forensic case, then you may have to shift gears to something like a why it happened and that mental health mitigation again.
And exploring the different options here for the defense, police started removing evidence from that crime scene weeks before the arrest. Does that play into a possible defense strategy here? Maybe looking at police messed this up. They got the evidence on there some other way.
Yeah, you can. That rush to judgment, that, blindness that happens when you decide who the suspect is before you really know who it is. There's a lot of arguments on the defense behalf to say you rushed to judgment, didn't look at anybody else, and this confirmation bias, meaning you saw what you wanted to see about my client, excluding others. We're going to hear some of that as this case progresses.
And there's something else that's kind of interesting. Aside from the murder charges, Kohberger's also charged with burglary. Does that mean that there's a broken door, a smashed window, something that prosecutors would point to and say it proves that he broke in, that he wasn't invited there?
Maybe, but not necessarily, because you can commit a burglary by walking into a place you're allowed to be in, but once you commit a crime in there, it turns that license to be in the house into a crime, turns it into a burglary. So they did that, I think, just to add on so that they cover all their bases, as opposed to broken door. We may or may not see a broken door. It doesn't mean it's not a burglary.
Now, assuming this does go to trial, who's the defense calling here to the witness stand? Is it his parents? Is it people who worked with him in that criminology program? Who can help exonerate him?
Well, it's interesting because in front of a fact jury, did he do it? Character witnesses are not allowable. It is literally who did what. Now, we may see, of course, some forensic experts know that DNA is not his, know it's too degraded to be told to be his. Crime scene technicians to come in and say, no, it didn't happen that way, it happened this way. But you're not going to see those type of character witnesses until you get to a potential sentencing or mitigation stage.
All right, Mark O'Mara, this is just starting to unfold, so I hope we can have you back soon. But thanks for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Love to. Be well.
Interesting look there. Up next here on the National Desk, accidental ingestion. What a new report says kids are accidentally eating and why researchers believe the number of cases is soaring. There are questions about why freedom of information requests for documents related to Hunter Biden's business dealings with China, Russia, and Ukraine are being denied. The National Desk, Christine Frizzau, spoke to the lawyer suing the Department of Justice for the information.
2023 marks year 5 of the investigation into Hunter Biden's business dealings, which only recently came to involve scrutiny of a laptop he allegedly left at a repair shop. The crux of the federal probe, led by the Department of Justice, includes Hunter Biden allegedly lying on an application to buy a gun and tax crimes related to business deals he had with top officials in China. His business partnerships there and other countries were a favorite topic of former President Donald Trump.
I don't make money from China. You do. I don't make money from Ukraine. You do.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever.
Republicans in Congress vowing to renew their investigation into the matter.
We're trying to stay focused on, was Joe Biden directly involved with Hunter Biden's business deals?
Outside of Congress, a Colorado attorney says he's been trying for more than a year to get access to more than 400 pages of documents.
Somebody looked at those 400 pages and decided they weren't going to see the light of day. So after saying to the court and to me that potentially responsive documents exist, somebody looked at those documents and I got a GLOMAR response.
A GLOMAR response is essentially them saying they can neither confirm nor deny the existence of the information. Kevin Evans says for him, it's not about politics, but the public's right to know if the then vice president's son was making deals with foreign countries. But he says he was told he did not put forth a legitimate public interest.
Perhaps national security concerns, influence peddling, quid pro quo. You know, those are I think are legitimate public concerns.
As Kevin Evans waits for more information he may get at a hearing scheduled for next week, we are waiting for more on this from the Department of Justice, which so far has not responded for a request for comment, and also any other information on the DOJ's investigation into Hunter Biden's finances, in which charges could be filed any day. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. 2 men charged in connection to an attack on 4 substations in Washington state over Christmas that cut power for thousands and caused $3 million worth of damage. Actor Jeremy Renner recovering after he was injured last weekend in a snowplow accident near Reno, Nevada. The city's mayor saying Renner was trying to help a stranded car outside of his home New Year's Day when he was run over by his own vehicle. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Looking ahead to stories making headlines this week, El Paso County's Colorado's first queer state representative is set to be sworn in on January 9th. Democrat Stephanie Vigil will represent District 16, which had previously been a longtime Republican seat. And adults in Connecticut will be able to purchase recreational cannabis products starting on the 10th. Sales will be limited to a 1/4 ounce of cannabis flower or its equivalent. Plus, President Biden will welcome Japan's Prime Minister to the White House on January 13th. The 2 leaders will discuss North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs, the war in Ukraine, and maintaining peace across the Taiwan Strait. New details now. The number of children accidentally consuming cannabis edibles increased between 2017 and 2021. 2017 saw just over 200 reported cases of accidental cannabis consumption by kids 5 and under. In 2021, that number was over 3,000. The study published in the journal Pediatrics saying more children staying at home due to the pandemic and the legalization of recreational cannabis by many states played a part in the jump. From Border Patrol to local law enforcement to now the U.S. Coast Guard, how mass migration challenges have expanded to the Florida Keys. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for being with us. An overwhelmed Border Patrol joined by other strapped federal agencies now being called to assist in the challenges of immigration. As the National Desk, Christine Frizzell reports, new unprecedented measures have now been taken as a result.
New warnings from the U.S. Coast Guard, which captured this video of migrants they say were stopped and sent back to their home country of Cuba. It's just one of many snapshots of the new front in the war on illegal immigration. The state of Florida, which took the dramatic step of closing Dry Tortugas National Park to, quote, provide care and coordinate transport to 300 migrants who arrived over the past couple days. Migrants often coming over on poorly made vessels, sometimes risking their lives, often fleeing communism and the worst economic conditions in decades.
What has happened is that the Biden administration, through their irresponsible policies, have created a situation where the borders are open, everybody knows that they're open, and so it's a free-for-all.
But some lawmakers say immigration, with some fixes to the immigration system, can help the United States.
We have shortage of workers right now. We don't have people to process the food, the manufacturing. At the same time, China is down. So if you really want to do something for America, if you want to bring down inflation, we have to pass immigration reform.
This is all occurring as Republicans are now in the majority in the House of Representatives and have vowed to make challenges at the border a top priority, some also calling it a top national security concern. A brand new report shows arrests of convicted criminals who are not U.S. citizens continues to fall from 70,000 in 2020 to 36,600 in 2021 to 36,300 in 2022. Critics blaming sanctuary laws, which in some cases prohibit ICE from working with local law enforcement to remove known criminals. A country facing new and distinct challenges and an expanded area of border to be patrolled. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
The Supreme Court has ruled that Title 42 will be extended into the new year, but what's next? The National Desk Jan Jeffcoat sat down with former Acting Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection and visiting fellow at FAIR, Mark Morgan, digging into what happens when the policy officially ends and there's nothing left to replace it.
First of all, I agree with your assessment that Title 42 at some point is going to go away. But I think it's very important to keep in mind that Title 42, it's not a border security or illegal immigration tool. It's a public health tool. Why is that important? Because, Jan, as we've been discussing for the past 2 years, we're already in the midst of the worst self-inflicted border security crisis in our lifetime. And that's with Title 42 being in place every day for the past 2 years. Why? Because this administration destroyed and dismantled every single effective border security tool we had in place. And the irony here is that they're using Title 42 not for the public health tool it's designed, but rather as a tool to try to convince and lie to American people that they're managing a crisis. And we know it's a lie. Once Title 42 goes away, because they're not using it as a public health tool, it's just going to take the crisis we have right now, Jan, and simply make it worse.
Yeah, and Mark, there's going to be this court hearing in February in regards to this. It could have major implications on the future of even U.S. border policy. So talk about how the U.S. border policy could look after this hearing.
Yeah, so look, this is a very important question we don't talk enough about. Again, because Title 42 right now, it's not a border security tool, but it's being utilized as one by this administration, again, to lie to the American people that they're managing it. Once that goes away, everything's going to revert back. Every single illegal alien or otherwise inadmissible migrant is going to be what's called a process under Title 8, which is the basic foundational element of our immigration law. Now, within that is called expedited removal. And so they're going to apply some of Title 42. Those that they're removing under Title 42 will now be removed under ER. But Jan, that's going to apply to only a very narrow set of illegal aliens, mostly single adult Mexican males. So what's going to happen is the majority of the couple of million that they were removing under Title 42 now will join the millions that they're releasing into the United States, which is what every single illegal alien wants. And so the result of that is that's just going to incentivize and encourage more illegal aliens, causing our border to be less secure than it is right now.
And I want to ask you about this new report that was released last week that showed in 2022, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, arrested more than 142,000 immigrants who were in this country illegally, but only half were deported. And of those who were deported, more than 46,000 had criminal convictions, which did include gang members and terrorists. Talk to us about how these numbers and how they are still historically low for ICE, considering how many migrants have crossed the border illegally overall.
Yeah, Jay, look, I really appreciate you bringing this up because we don't talk about this enough because for obvious reasons, we're so focused on the physical border, which that's where the crisis begins. But that's only where the crisis begins. It ends in the interior United States. So keep in mind, the past 24 months, when we've seen the highest level of illegal aliens, we're near an almost 6 million total encounters and known gotaways. The known gotaways account for over 1.2 million just in the past 24 months. Yet ICE has only arrested about 142,000, not to mention the 16 to 20 million plus illegal aliens we already have. So it's a drop in the bucket. And the irony here is that there's two cause and effect here. One is the creation of more sanctuary cities and states like New York City and the state of California, which refuses to allow local law enforcement to work with ICE to actually arrest and remove criminal illegal aliens. And of course, the second is the most radical restrictions that DHS Secretary Mayorkas has placed on ICE. He's literally mandating that the ICE cannot perform their statutory mission to protect this country by removing illegal aliens. And the end result, that literally means there are more criminals, more murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, the list goes on, that are actually roaming the streets of this country.
All right, former Acting Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
You bet. Thanks, Shan.
Some relief is on the way to address opioid addiction in America. After 2022 marked another deadly year in the nationwide epidemic, CDC data shows more than 110,000 drug overdose deaths in a single 12-month span driven by fentanyl-laced pills. Additional federal funding is coming for addiction treatment, but illegal deadly drugs keep pouring over the border. Recently, Border Patrol agents in Arizona announcing the seizure of 1.2 million fentanyl pills. Former agents cite the lack of resources at legal points of entry.
They can't man all these POEs properly. They don't have the adequate resources. They don't have the technology.
Meanwhile, the $6 billion Purdue Pharma settlement is being reviewed by federal courts. If the deal is finalized this year, the money would go to fund drug treatment programs nationwide. The Biden administration has extended the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for all foreign air travelers coming into the U.S. A new emergency amendment issued by the TSA will extend it until April 10th. The policy, introduced in October 2021, was set to expire Sunday. The U.S. just implemented a COVID testing requirement for travelers from China. The DOJ giving the U.S. Postal Service the green light to deliver prescription abortion drugs, even in states that restrict access to the procedure. USPS requested the opinion after the Supreme Court ruling in June overturned Roe v. Wade. Walgreens and CVS say they will sell abortion-inducing pills where allowed by law. New FDA rules allow retail pharmacies to obtain certification to dispense those drugs. Potential 2024 Republican presidential candidate, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, was sworn in for a second term in Tallahassee. The National Desk Victoria de Cardenas has what the governor told supporters, including his attack on President Biden's policies.
Taking the oath of office as the 46th governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis and First Lady Casey DeSantis.
Freedom lives here in our great Sunshine State of Florida.
Speaking immediately after being sworn in for a second term, Governor Ron DeSantis quickly turned to the accomplishments of his first 4 years in office, from growing the economy and protecting individual liberty during the pandemic to course-correcting public education and protecting the environment. All reasons why he believes the state is drawing so many new residents.
We are the nation's fastest growing state. We are #1 in new business formations. We are #1 in tourism. We are #1 in economic freedom. We rank #1 in education freedom.
He focused on the many issues on the minds of Florida voters, from inflation to public safety. But with his poll numbers among Republican voters growing nationwide, everything Governor DeSantis does is looked at through the lens of a possible presidential run in 2024. And some of his speech this morning will only add fuel to that fire.
Now, Florida's success has been made more difficult by the floundering federal establishment in Washington, D.C. Federal government has gone on an inflationary spending binge that has left our nation weaker and our citizens poorer.
Florida Democrats, badly outnumbered in both the state house and Senate, continue to complain that the governor is blinded by his political aspirations when he needs to be focused on the urgent needs of the people right here in Florida. Orlando Democrat Representative LaVon Bracey Davis's comments were typical of the minority party reaction, posting in part, "Instead of speaking to all Floridians, Democrat or Republican, rich or poor, black or white, he stood with the powerful and not the people in preparation for his run for president." Florida Atlantic University political science professor Kevin Wagner, who has been following Governor DeSantis's career closely for years, says it's early to be reading into those tea leaves, but that any popular Florida governor is going to be considered a presidential contender.
The sitting governor of Florida is always going to be on a short list of potential presidential candidates, just because of the importance of Florida, the size of Florida, and the exposure that the governor of Florida generally tends to get. I think we're just going to have to wait for the governor to tell us what his plans are.
Reporting in West Palm Beach, Florida, Victoria de Cardenas, reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Governor DeSantis gaining popularity among potential Republican voters as a possible 2024 presidential candidate. Can see the breakdown right here. A recent Morning Consult poll showing his favorability ticked up to 72% from 68% at the end of November. Slightly more GOP voters, 75%, viewed former President Donald Trump more positively. Breaking down 2022 crime nationwide, our fact-check team detailing the cities that saw a decrease.
What some might brand as a crime surge across America needs some context. Well, some of the biggest cities are actually seeing crime drop, but there are some notable crime hikes we want to talk about as well. Back with the Fact Check team tonight. Courtney, give us just the facts here.
We looked into it, and while it's still pretty early to tell exactly what the trends for 2022 looked like, in some cities, crime rates actually slightly decreased. For example, homicides fell in 18 of the country's largest cities, like Philadelphia and Chicago, compared to last year. But in the other 12, like Seattle, the rates rose or stayed the same. same. Taking a look at New York City, nearly every kind of crime increased except homicide by the fall of this year. Big cities where crime rates are inherently higher happen to usually lean left. In 2022, the 20 largest cities in the U.S. by population had the most Democratic mayors.
Sure. I mean, there's also just more people there, period. So there's that factors into the equation. And in fact, when you look at violent crime, Janae, conservative-led states are the ones reporting the most gun deaths.
Right, Eugene. We look at the latest CDC gun death rate data. Now, the top 5 states with the highest gun death rate include Mississippi, Louisiana, Wyoming, Missouri, and Alabama. Now, these are states rather than cities, but former President Donald Trump won all of them. We also looked at an FBI data analysis from USA Facts that found Alaska, New Mexico, Tennessee, Arizona, and Louisiana are the top 5 states with the highest violent crime rate, and Trump also won 3 of those in 2020. Now, we do want to note that same analysis found Washington, D.C. had the highest violent and property crime rates, and of course, D.C. leans blue.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not fair to politicize crime stats without looking at the state or the local laws and prosecution practices that might impact the numbers, but we would be here for a very long time tonight if we did that. So you can do some of your own research. You'll find links to the fact check team sources on our website, thenationaldesk.com.
Rick Singer, the mastermind of the college admissions bribery scandal, has been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Singer was also ordered to pay more than $10 million in restitution to the IRS. Federal prosecutors say the 62-year-old spent more than a decade helping wealthy parents get their kids into selective schools with fake test scores and athletic credentials. Filling in the gaps as companies deal with a worker shortage, a minimum wage increase impacting small, struggling businesses, how they're adapting to the change. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. Our team of nearly 4,000 local journalists bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, starting with the steps New York businesses are taking to stay open.
John Albert has gotten used to New York State's annual minimum wage hikes, but this year his focus has turned to just getting new employees in the door.
We need to pay more than that right now to attract any sort of employees.
Because of the labor shortage, he's gotten creative. I am leaving for a delivery. Raising wages and bringing in this robot named Rosie to fill in the gaps.
Purchased a robot, and the robot helps the servers provide better service to our customer base.
Though Albert stopped paying his entry-level workers minimum wage last year, the rate increase will have him playing catch-up.
It just pushes everything up. The whole market goes up.
A lot of people who had very few choices now have choices and are basically saying that, you know what, I'm not just going to accept any job that comes my way. I'm going to wait for higher wages.
This minimum wage hike is going to be especially felt by small business owners who were barely getting by paying their employees minimum wage and now have to fork out an extra $1 an hour.
You generally don't have a win-win situation throughout in these kinds of circumstances.
Charles Hughes is disabled and living on a fixed income. His bills are piling up.
Paying a $70 water bill one month. First started out with a $60 one, then it went up to $65, and then $75, and now I got one here for $80.
Alabama power bills will increase on average $6.81 for a residential customer. That's almost $82 more per year. January's increase is on top of 2 rate increases implemented last year. The base rate went up by 3.3%, an extra $2.67 a month for the average customer. This rate is controlled by Spire Energy. The second increase is the price they pay for gas, which is passed down to customers. It went up by 5%, adding an extra $5 on your bill each month.
I think it's ludicrous, too high.
Downtown Charleston has seen tremendous volume over the past several years.
With growth comes a looming problem.
Safety and I should say violence is a concern everywhere.
It's why King Street business owner Keith Benjamin is grateful for the latest ordinance updates put in place by the city of Charleston.
It is up to us to agree to follow that playbook.
A playbook that holds more stringent requirements for permitting, security, and addressing underage drinking. If a business fails to comply, it could face a 90-day suspension of its license. A third infraction could mean revoking that license for a year.
There's a lot of power in this ordinance.
Some owners are hesitant about the latest updates.
They're afraid that while this administration has been great to business owners and local merchants, that future administrations will decide to use it for the wrong reasons in order to put people out of business.
But safety is a top priority for everyone.
Because if we all do it, then Charleston just remains that world-class destination where people can rest assured that they're going to be in a safe place at all times.
Still to come here on the National Desk, our team of correspondents breaking down this week in Washington, digging into the drama surrounding who will be the next House Speaker.
Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day to report on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. For some perspective, I'm joined by Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman. Scott, the political story of the year so far, the newly in the majority House Republicans and their fight on who will be their Speaker of the House. What does the long battle say about the state of the GOP?
Yeah, Steve, it's interesting because you've got two different trains of thought on this. Some people who look at this and say, well, this is a harbinger of what's to come. This is a party that's in disarray. It's going to have very difficult time finding consensus on anything moving forward, let alone this speaker vote. And so does this spell doom or at least severe trouble for the party moving forward? Possibly. Then there are others who say it's democracy playing out. It's not a shock. There are always going to be factions within a party that disagrees. And when given some power or given an opportunity, they're going to use that as a catalyst for change that they demand. So there could be some truth between both of them. I think in the long term, though, Steve, when you talk about the party, does this mean even if Kevin McCarthy gets what he wants ultimately, it would be a very rough ride? To some degree, yeah, but look back. I mean, we saw that with the Tea Party. You saw John Boehner, remember, for those people who don't have a long memory, was Speaker of the House, and he essentially got pushed out by his own party for not being able to agree with some of those tougher, hardline, more conservative factions. Then Paul Ryan had a similar fate. We don't know what will happen with Kevin McCarthy ultimately, but it is, if nothing else, a warning, a shot across the bow that this is going to be a thorn in his side, and he is going to have to thread a very, very small needle to appease both those votes he needs with that very, very tiny margin for room for error there, and appease the mainstream Republicans as well. It's a difficult thing to do.
And you mentioned the slim majority, the 4-seat majority. And look, it's what we saw on the Senate side the last couple of years with the House, with the Senate and Democrats over there having a 50-50 Senate and really only +1. And now they're 51-49. We're probably going to see more of that on the Senate side, too. Really, a couple of people can hold the whole chamber hostage because the majority is so slim. But what are the long-term ramifications here, though? While it's undoubtedly fascinating political theater, even making some history in the process, will this all just wind up being a footnote or an answer to a trivia question down the road?
It very well could be, Steve. I mean, look, we in Washington love to hyper-focus on these events as they unfold in real time. It is great drama for us, especially political junkies and even those who aren't. And this is a prime example of that, this kind of minute-by-minute breakdown about who's saying who they'll vote for, who may be willing to change, what concessions may be made. This is all great for cable news and for other media as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that this is some big scar across the party that will last forever. I mean, we've had government shutdowns. We've had multiple impeachments over the last few decades. And none of those things have damaged one of the parties so greatly that they haven't been able to recover. I would imagine if this wraps up in a week or so, it will be just something that's a blip in the rearview mirror at some point.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing this question on Jeopardy one day down the road. Anyway, Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman, thank you. Dee Dee, back to you.
Would make a good Jeopardy question. Guys, thank you. The TSA's top 10 list of unusual discoveries at security checkpoints. We'll show you what was found and the fines if you're caught. New details on the FTX collapse. The founder of the crypto exchange pleading not guilty to fraud and other charges. Sam Bankman-Fried accused of stealing customer funds to cover loans taken out by FTX's crypto hedge fund. Prosecutors say he used those funds to invest in other companies and to donate to politicians. 2 other senior executives from the businesses have pleaded guilty. The TSA has released its top 10 list of jaw-dropping discoveries at security checkpoints nationwide. The 3rd best catch in 2022, a little sticky. A disassembled, look right here, gun inside jars of peanut butter at JFK. The 2nd top find, a gun inside raw chicken at Fort Lauderdale International Airport. And topping the list last year, fentanyl inside candy wrappers at LAX. For the full list, just go to our website, thenationaldesk.com. Important to note here, the TSA confiscated a record number of firearms from passengers last year. Getting caught with one at an airport checkpoint can result in a fine of more than $1,000, even more if the gun is loaded. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of The National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week.